I want to welcome to the program just an absolutely incredible story. A guy who I've got a ton of respect for after I've read his book. Many of you probably know him as NBA star for the Orlando Magic, but Jonathan Isaac, welcome to the program.
Man, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Listen, you're not just here because you're an NBA star. You're here because you're a best-selling author as well. And your book, Why I Stand, is one of the best reads that I've had in a long time.
Oh,
And look, obviously, both the title and sort of the backstory of how this all came to fruition was about you choosing to stand during the national anthem when the NBA was in the bubble, and you were basically the only person that did that. And of course, you're going to receive a lot of attention for that. I'm sure you knew.
right. Right.
But I think the backstory of who you are and what brought you to that day is actually some of the most fascinating stuff. What can you tell us about this whole process?
The process has been it's been amazing, but it's been so surreal at the same time. I never what I do love about the book is that I just never would have imagined it coming to life. The same way that early on in my younger years and even in high school and college, I never would have imagined being the only one to stand for anything because of the different struggles that I had. So it's just like to see the book, to see who I am today, who I've grown to become. I know that it's just a testament to the reality of what a relationship with Christ can do and the transformative power of that. And yeah, I just want to keep moving forward with it.
What's so amazing is in today's day and age, so rarely do you see any individual sort of challenge conventional wisdom, challenge what everybody expects of them, and do something that they believe is right, despite all of the criticism that they know they'll take, right? Because it's so much easier, so much more marketable to not challenge any of that, right? And somebody like you is in the pinnacle of that discussion because there are contracts, there are marketing deals, there are all kinds of things that people are like, hey man, can't you just like keep it chill for a little bit and not have to do this because we could sign a great deal with this person and that. And you kind of threw all that out and decided like, no, this is right for me.
Yeah, and there was a lot of that. I've had plenty of conversations with even with my own representation, and not anything bad on them or wrong with them. It was just like they're looking out for what they
Yeah, they're
believe,
trying to do their job, right?
my best interest. So we want to keep you as marketable and as equitable to everyone as possible. But yeah, I just I believed in what I was standing for, and looking out into the world, and so many people were hyper focused on racism at the time, and rightfully so because of what happened. But racism is not the only thing that plagues the hearts of men, and I couldn't think of a better antidote or remedy for the times other than the gospel when it comes to changing the hearts of men. And so it was like this moment was almost thrust upon me because I was in the bubble, and it was either like, this is a decision that you got to make. But I'm just glad that I was prepared for it. And again, the book speaks to the different people that have been a part of my life and helped groom me to where I am today. My pastor, my now wife, my church family, Coach Gates and Bora and all those guys that were so early in the story, but they all have a place in it.
Yeah, well, I want to get into the book and your background in a second, but I do also want to ask, you're about to walk out on the floor and you know what's going to happen, right? Were you nervous?
I was terrified.
Yeah.
I really was, and I didn't sleep the night before either, and so that's that's detailed in the book. But it's almost like you're going before the firing squad. I knew I could feel everyone staring at me because I didn't have the shirt on. My teammates, dude, everybody. I knew what I was
This
walking
is the
into.
BLM shirt that the rest of the team
Right.
was wearing. Right.
Everybody else in the building had the shirt on. It was just me who didn't, who had on my jersey. And so, I was getting looks as I was warming up, and it was just like, here we go. And I really don't think that people understand like how crucial the moment was, because I was still in the bubble. Like after I stood, it wasn't like I was able to go home. Like
Right.
no, we live in the bubble. And
Yeah,
so
you go back and sit. You have to go talk with everybody who's like, dude, come on.
yeah, exactly. So it was a tough moment, and I just the book really brings that to life, and how I got there and the aftermath and all that as well.
Well, what really brought it to life for me is getting through a little bit of your background, right? How you grew up. Your mom sounds absolutely incredible. Um, But I thought there was a story early in the book that you had about the paper cup with your dad,
Yeah.
which I thought was so. I mean, it sounds small, right? But the fact that you recall it with such precision so many years later, and it was about whether or not you had thrown away a cup in a garbage can when he found it sort of littered underneath the car. And
Hmm.
he knew darn well that you left the cup there, but you wouldn't admit to it. And you got a
Right.
real lesson in integrity at an early age.
Yeah, and you know, my dad is dope, man. My dad, you know, even knowing the moment for him, and he's talked about it too, like, you know, when it comes to whoopings or just disciplining your child, it wasn't that was hard for him to do, but it was almost like he cherished the principle of integrity so much. And knowing that it's going to be something that we need, that it was like it was hard for him to do, but he thought it was necessary. And even in that moment and being able to reflect upon it, it was like I could have won in that moment if he had believed me and like, yeah, I got him. But it just works in your life in a negative way when you get away with one thing and the next thing and the next thing. It kind of deteriorates your character and integrity level. And so I'm glad, you know, I have the dad that I have, and what I try my best to do is show what him not being there, how that affected me. And so, you know, he really was like Superman to me early growing up, and for him not to be there anymore. And now, you know, everything that I'm dealing with, everything that I'm going through, I'm only dealing with it in my own head. My mom is busting her behind, working all the time, just trying to provide for us. My brothers are all doing their own thing. And so I don't have an outlet. I don't have anybody necessarily, you know, catering to my emotional needs or anything like that. It's just, you know, go to school, play basketball, and figure out how you're feeling behind the scenes.
Yeah. What was so you move from New York, you go down into Florida in a just got to be a cultural whirlwind, right? I mean, and we're talking Naples here. I mean, this is for those of us who know Naples well, like that is a huge adjustment from where you grew up in New York. And you're trying, I love the story about you trying to figure out how to fit in and people not necessarily seeing it that way. And you just trying to weave through the all these dynamics at such a young age, but at the same time, building your character and holding that integrity that you had that you were just instilled with at a young age.
Yeah, it really was a cultural shock. You know, I had never, you know, been around a large group of white people before in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and so to kind of be thrust into this moment, and again, without a sounding board, without anybody, you know, walking me through that this is going to be a hard time, you're going to have to adjust. It was literally just like I'm dealing with all this in my own head, what people are saying, what people are thinking. And I had that first moment where, you know, I'm horse playing with the other kids because that's how we got along in the Bronx. It was you horse play and you make friends. And so that's what I'm doing to try to fit in. And it's almost like I was so off. I was so wrong about my own perception of myself that was the first time that I developed, you know, and like being self-aware and being self-conscious and like, oh, you know, I'm not who I thought I was. And to hear the principal, you know, have, and again, not anything wrong with him. You know, he's thinking like, you know, these kids are going to get hurt. And so, but to hear like almost the dread in his voice, like, we have to protect these kids from your son. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm a
Yeah.
monster. and,
Yeah.
and
Right.
so it was difficult, and just trying to navigate that as a young kid, and you know, it was tough.
Well, the church was always sort of central to your life, right? And as you're going through all these changes, it seemed to me like throughout reading your book, that's the grounding for all of this, right? It's why you don't ultimately lose your spirit, as so many kids have when they're thrust into a situation like you were, where they feel different, they feel like they're an outcast, they feel
Right.
like they're never going to fit in. You had this grounding that you kept going back to.
Well, growing up in church, I didn't necessarily understand what it was. Again, it was more tradition for me in Bronx, in New York, and it was that Pentecostal spirit-filled church where everything is just going on and it's lively, and we're just having fun. Really, we're not really holding on to anything that's being said. And then I get to Naples, and I have these first instances where I'm feeling different. I'm feeling left out. Going to youth group was the first time that I had a sense of like, okay, these are friends. Like they, you know, they're nice. The youth group leaders are nice, and they took a liking to me, and I started to play in these youth group skits, and I was one of the leading roles all the time. So it was like it was a moment where I could breathe.
Yeah.
even before I found basketball, really to play it, and then obviously, I go out and I start living my life, and I make it to the NBA, and then I find myself back in the same place that I started. So I feel like I just had these moments of kind of getting brought back around full circle to the church, and it being the grounding thing that I now hold on to in life.
So I also found it interesting that you described a little bit of the recruiting process, right? Where, I mean, you got to know you're a good basketball player, but all of a sudden, I mean, clearly your lack of knowledge about the recruiting process, as you describe in the book, had me dying. I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, especially the line where what does it say? I didn't know the NCAA from the NAACP,
Yeah, yeah.
but I really didn't. And part of it was simply because I never in a million years would have expected myself to be in the position that I was in. And so I love to watch basketball as an art, as just a passion, and to play it. But I was never in my mind to be like, I'm one of those kids that are going to go and play and get a scholarship or anything like that. I always reserved that in my mind for the other kids that I was playing with. And so when I was on the phone with a coach and he's like, do you know where our school is at? I'm like, I have no idea. Do you know what conference we're in? Conference? What the heck is a conference? I have no idea. And so it was real weird to kind of walk that line and just learn about thing, and at the same time be really highly touted and highly recruited.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I think, and obviously comes back to how raised with the church, with faith, because a lot of kids, you get put in that situation, all of a sudden you have John Calipari on the phone and Rick Pitino on the phone, as you describe, and all these people trying to recruit you. I mean, you can kind of begin thinking that, like, I'm kind of the show here, and you didn't. And you didn't.
Yeah, yeah, and that was, I mean, and even when you fast forward a little bit and you go to the draft, where it was like, I'm gonna be the number 6 pick in the draft, and I was the number 6 pick in the draft, but it was still like, what do I do? Like, I have no idea, and I could tell the difference in myself of me versus the other guys who were getting drafted, because they knew what was going on. Like they were present for the moment. They knew that after they got drafted, they were gonna go have the party with their family and celebrate and all those things. But for me, it was like, dude, what do I do? I went.
Now what?
I walked and I got a slice of pizza, and I went back to the hotel and sent my family home, and was just, and like, that's it. I'm the number. And so I think it's helped me, but at the same time, if I had to do it again, I would be more present for a lot of those things that were happening, and because ultimately I would believe that it was possible. But I think at the same time, it helped me stay grounded and humble to a degree that I didn't see myself as highly as everyone else did.
Because that's a big leap too. I mean, you're a young guy. You're still a very young guy, but clearly when you're drafted, I mean, you're a few years out of high school, and you go from your entire experience up to that point to, being a millionaire and being around these legends that all of us have watched for years and years, but yet being able to hold on to your identity is who you are. I think is really one of the most extraordinary things about you, because I got to imagine any line of work, but particularly like the NBA, when you're surrounded by people who all are trying to get the same thing and do the same things, there's a tendency to sort of have a group think about
Right.
the way you're supposed to proceed. And you resisted that.
Well, it was something that I resisted as I grew, because when I first got into the league, and even early on in basketball became my identity. It was the only thing that I saw value in when it came to me, because it got the girls to like me. It got everybody to want to be around me. And I would walk through the halls of the school, and everybody be like, that's Jonathan Isaac. And only because I was a talented basketball player. And so I fed off of it, and I ate into it. And it only made me strive harder to be a great basketball player, because I was like, this is the ticket to me being who I want to be. But where I grew was ultimately being able to find my identity in Christ. And even when I first get to the league, I'm trying. I want to fit in with my teammates. I'm doing everything that an NBA player has access to, because I want to be in that life. I want to get everybody to like me, all my teammates to like me. And as my life started to turn around with developing a relationship with Christ, that's when I started to find myself rejecting a lot of the things that everybody else was doing and kind of going my own way. But it wasn't something that was easy to do, as obviously detailed in the book with different stories. But I grew into it.
Yeah. Well, and what's so interesting is, particularly with the noteworthy piece about standing during the national anthem. This was not during the NBA. To be clear, this was not the debate like the NFL was having, where there were differences of opinion. There were no differences. Like you said, officials were kneeling, right? And
Yeah.
everything that led up to that point, it's like, well, that's what you do. You're an NBA player, and yet somehow you found the courage to not do that.
Yeah, it was all one way. Like there
Right.
was, and again, it speaks to just how crazy the time was. It was like one of the things that I rejected, or that I didn't necessarily like, was it was like, this is the only way in this moment to affirm the support of Black lives. This is the only thing you can do. And so you had every ref, you had every coach, you had every player, you had every team official, presidents and GMs, and everybody was kneeling as a way to almost pledge their allegiance to the movement and to the organization. And so that's one of the things that I didn't like early on, even because it was just like, that's not the only way to support Black lives. And what it turned from was a symbol into an order. And that's what kind of made me uneasy. And I was like, I've seen my life supported by the gospel. I've seen people that look like me and their lives supported by the gospel. And I can't think of a better antidote for the times that we see ourselves in other than that message. And so that's why I decided to stand up and give it.
It's so, everything has become so political, right? And we've seen corporations basically been hijacked by some of the same movements you're talking about now,
Right.
but basically trying to put into a political context, their value statements, which, if anybody believes that some of these corporations have your true value at heart, like, I got something for them. But it's different when it's an individual and you're standing there alone and you're knowing that, like, you've got endorsements issues and all kinds of things. What was the immediate reaction of your teammates to this?
Well, so detailed in the book as well. We have a heated conversation. So after I stand in the bubble, we finish the game, we win the game, everybody goes back to the hotel. We don't hear anything. The next day we go to practice, and as we're on the bus heading back from practice, I get a text to my phone, and it's like, team meeting, players only, this is the place. And so as I'm getting off the bus, a teammate taps me and says, this is about you. And so I'm like, okay, well, okay, this is going to get interesting. And so, yeah, we had a heated conversation. And one of the things that, for me, that I understood is that it was an emotional time. Like, there were guys who again really believed in what they were kneeling for, and all the respect to them. I wasn't protesting their protest. I was standing up for what I believed in the moment, to be an answer to the problems that we see in our society and our world ultimately. And not everybody agreed with this. So we had a heated conversation, and some guys understood where I was coming from. They may have not agreed, but they respected the fact that I did what I did. And there were other guys who were adamant about, me hijacking the movement or trying to make it all about me. But that wasn't my intention.
Which was the opposite of what you were doing.
Right. And so what we left it as was just like, look, you guys believed in what you were kneeling for, and I believe in what I'm standing for. And, I respect your decision to kneel, and I just ask for that same respect in return.
Yeah. Well, in everyday sense, you've been able to demonstrate that, right? And what your values are, and how you care no less deeply about Black lives than anybody else, by refusing to stand, or refusing to kneel rather, on that day. How much have you been able to sort of, maybe convince is the wrong word, but just have people understand that your heart is basically in the same place on a lot of these things, but the way they go about it isn't right for you?
Right. I think that has been something that has, I wouldn't say changed, but has like grown over time. And even having conversations with some of those same teammates and players has been shifted from them understanding where I was coming from. And but obviously there are still people who still disagree with me, or think that what I did was wrong, or what I did was selfish. But like you said, I've tried my best to kind of humbly walk out my position and where I'm coming from, and again, not deny the fact that I see what they see, but that I believe that there's a different answer, and there's a better answer than the one of division and anger and revenge and vitriol and tribalism. And so yeah.
One of the things I'm interested in is, does the NBA, after all of this, right? The NBA, like any other organization, and they basically try to cater to what they perceive the values are of the organizations, the players, and their fan base, and everything
Right.
else. Clearly, you have articulated a position very different from the one that they had in mind at the time. But I think over time has shown to be not only genuine and sincere, but courageous and incredible. Are you at a point where anybody comes to you to ask you about any of these like tough social issues? Because I imagine like your perspective on this is incredibly valuable to organizations that are trying to expand a base beyond just sort of a monolithic ideology.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I would expect that to a degree. Not that I feel that what I have to say is so, highly touted more than anybody else's, but I would think that it would be reasonable to, but it hasn't happened.
Mm.
Um, I had one conversation and I decided to leave it out, like leave it out of the book, and so you're getting an exclusive.
Oh,
I
nice. Okay.
I had one conversation with somebody who is around and familiar with us and was also in the bubble. And one of the things that he detailed to me was that, man, I agree with where you stand. I'm a Christian as well, and I think what you did was the right thing to do. But I couldn't do it in that moment, and because I felt the pressure of everybody else, wanting me to do it and this, that, and the third, I decided to kneel. But when I kneeled, I looked up and you were standing. And whatever, I'm this age and you're that age, and you had more courage than me in that moment. Um, and one of the things that I said back to him was like, man, like this that's not going to be the only time to stand. Like there's going to be a million more opportunities to stand because we're human, and we're going to continue to fight. We're going to continue to get on each other's nerves, and terrible, tragic things are going to continue to happen. But the message of love is the one that is truly needed. And so we had that conversation.
That's so it's just, it blows me away. I mean, you don't see it this way. I mean, I hope you do in some ways, but the courage that you had to do that in the moment that you did it is something that I mean, I hope to God that at some point, if I'm stuck in a situation like that, that I would have the courage to do. I'm just not sure everybody would. I'm not sure I would. And that, like, you have been an inspiration to so many people about their, if they feel like something's not right, that they have the ability, they can get through this. They can express themselves. They can do what they think is right, and the world's not going to end.
Yeah, and a lot of times it does start with one person, and it does, and not even saying that person is me, but seeing somebody else do that can encourage and inspire you to do the same. And that's a big part of the reason why the book is here, is to show people that, man, I'm not this just courageous guy who walked in there and was like, yeah, I know what it is that I believe in, and screw everybody else. It was like, no, man, I'm the kid who was on anxiety medication playing basketball at Florida State. And I've been developed in this way through a relationship with Christ, to where it's like, I know what I'm standing for is the truth because of the way that it's affected me in my own life through my experiences. So I'm not just saying Jesus is the answer to be cliche. It's like, he's been the answer for me. But honestly, like, to your point about like, people being able to be individuals, it's like, you don't necessarily have to be right in your thing, but you just have to be willing to say what it is that you feel and say what it is that you think. I believe that I'm right in the sentiment that that God's love, the way that God loves us, is going to be the answer to the world's problems as it comes to interpersonal relationships. And so that's why I had the courage in that moment to do it. But if like you said, if you feel a certain way, or you don't be afraid to stand on what you believe in, and to say it. But one of the things that my pastor said to me the night before I stood was, you cannot stand for God and God not stand for you. And so that was a big encouragement to me doing it, because it's like, I know I'm not standing for myself. I know that if anything, I don't want to be out here.
Right.
And even just again, reading the story, looking at my background, that's the last thing that I want to do, is go against what everybody else is doing. But I knew what I was standing for was true to me, and it was honest, and it was sincere. And so I decided to go through with it.
Yeah, it's one of the things that makes your story so interesting, is that you're an unlikely hero here in a lot of ways, given your description of your own growing up and your description of your own mental state as you're going from place to place and trying to fit in. And I mean, you're anything but like a class clown who's sort of trying to stand out, right? You're trying to fit in as best you possibly can. And now here you find yourself at a young age, the top of your profession, having to be, something totally different than anybody else is doing.
Right. Right. And it does, to me, all it does is highlight the truth of how transformative a relationship with Christ can be, and ultimately just his unconditional love, because that was the thing that got me. And his unconditional love being shared to me through the people who were in my life. Doc, my wife, again, the church family, they walked out what Jesus' unconditional love is like, whether you're up, whether you're down, whether you make a shot, whether you miss a shot. And again, that's what I feel is going to be the answer ultimately, that if we can choose to love each other the way that God loves each of us, which is past, in spite of our sins, in spite of our faults and our differences, then we could have real change on both sides. It's not just one side loving and forgiving the other, but both sides choosing to love and forgive each other.
Yeah, well, you're a credit to everybody in your family who and those around you who raised you the way you did. I think you did more by standing alone to bring people together than basically anything the NBA has done. That's me saying that, not you. I'm not going to get you in trouble with that.
All good, all good. All good. But I think that, I mean, even to the point of the NBA, it's like it's what's happened is one side has been painted as evil and racist and all these things. So it's like, you do feel that you have a lot of people feel that they have the moral high ground to then attack the other side or take one side or take a position. But, and especially in an entertainment field, it's, to me, it would only be beneficial to you to, try your best, at least, to stay in the middle and just share entertainment to the world. But when you see one side is evil, it's easy to only want to cater to the other side. And so you don't see them as necessarily human.
Well, these are the important conversations that we need to have. Before I get to my 3 questions, real quick, they're rapid fire. How's the knee? How's the recovery? We're going to see you next season.
Man, I'm feeling so good. I'm feeling so good. I just got off the court not too long ago, and I rushed home to knock out these 2 podcasts. But I'm feeling good, man. I'm strong, and I'm just ready to continue to just ramp up things as I move throughout the summer and be ready for the start of the season.
Well, you got a lot of new fans. I know that. You've done a world for everybody and trying to bring people together. So thank you for that, Jonathan. Here's the 3 questions. All right. If you could plan your last meal on earth, what would it be?
Oh, if I could plan my last meal, I'm just like a home cooked meal guy. So like some baked chicken, some baked barbecue chicken that my mom would make, some rice, some macaroni and cheese, and plantains.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Second question. If you never got into basketball, if this was not your career, and I'm even going to put the author thing on that too, is if you were not an author and you had this whole blue sky that you can fill with anything you wanted to do in life, what would it be?
Man, this is supposed to be rapid fire. This is going to sound really, really weird.
Nothing sounds weird to this question. You won't believe some of the answers we've had.
Yeah, honestly, like basketball for me wasn't something that I ran after. It was something that I loved to do, and I kind of just got passed along to each stage. And next thing you know, I'm in the NBA. But when I was young, I really did have a real genuine love for animals. And so whenever I was like doing class projects or anything like that, I would do them on a Tasmanian devil or an anaconda or something like that. So I had this thought in the back of my mind that I should be a zookeeper.
A zookeeper, that's perfect.
That's something that I've actually told a good amount of people. So I'd be a zookeeper right now.
I feel like the Orlando Zoo owes a debt of gratitude to get you in amongst the animals at some point.
Yeah.
All right. Here's the last question. You got to follow me on this. All right. So our view is that people are basically motivated by all successful people are motivated by one of 2 things, either the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat. And it's not that anybody enjoys defeat or doesn't like victory. It's that the thrill of victory person is the consummate optimist, right? The glass half full, always charging up the hill, trying to get to the next thing, right? The agony of defeat person is somebody whose every victory they've enjoyed for like 2.5 seconds, but every defeat that they've ever had or setback in life, they remember and they hold on to it. And they work that much harder to ensure that it never happens again, or it happens differently, or they can get to that next goal where they're not in that situation. Right. So there's a spectrum there, obviously.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about that, where do you find yourself?
I would say, being completely honest with myself, I would be closer towards the middle, but on the side of what would we say, like not enjoying defeat. And I think that's a part of just the way that I've kind of lived my life, and especially the way I've grown up and always being anxious and never wanting to put myself out there, always kind of taking the back seat to things. And And so, but I would say I've become more of the person who, I not even so much as thrilled by winning, but thrilled by, like, almost like, God, like, I don't know what you have next for me. It's like the more that I've leaned into what I believe my purpose to be, the bigger it's gotten. And so the more that I've kind of just been excited about it. But I would say through the entire course of my life, I would say I'm closer to the middle, but on the side of trying my best to rid myself of defeat.
That sounds exactly right. And there's no right or wrong answers to this one. There's authentic ones, and we got a very authentic one from you on that. Listen, Jonathan Isaac, we're all huge fans. We're rooting for your comeback here from an injury for next season. We'll be watching. An author of Why I Stand. I assume we can get this at any bookstore.
Yes, sir. I would encourage everybody to go and grab it off of Amazon, but it is in Barnes and Nobles, Books a Million. I got it right here just so you guys can see it.
Oh yeah.
And you said this already, but the book really is so much more than just about standing in the bubble or refusing a vaccine. That's something we didn't get to talk too much on, but that's in there as well. It really is just about my journey and how I got to those moments in the first place and how I was able to face fear and anxiety and all those different things through developing a relationship with Christ. And so I just encourage everybody to check it out.
That's awesome. Jonathan Isaac, thanks for joining us.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.